The sun was just beginning to claw its way above the jagged ridges of the Badlands, spilling red gold light over the frost-bitten grass, when Samuel Boone, a quiet, broad-shouldered rancher with more scars than friends, guided his tired mare down a narrow cattle trail toward the creek. He'd been riding since before dawn, checking fence lines after a restless night haunted by the howls of coyotes too close to his herd, and he was thinking only of hot coffee when he spotted something strange by the bend in the water, a heap of wool and burlap lying too still for the morning breeze to be the only thing moving it. At first, Boone thought it was a discarded bedroll, maybe left behind by a drifter, but as he rode closer, the shape shifted ever so slightly, like something alive was under it, and his hand went instinctively to the colt at his hip. He dismounted slowly, boots crunching on the brittle frost, and called out low, "You hurt?" There was no answer, only a faint, irregular shiver under the blanket. Boone crouched down, his breath steaming in the cold air, and was about to reach for the edge when a voice, faint and broken, sliced through the silence. "Please, don't touch me." The words weren't a scream or even sharp, they were soaked in fear, pleading, as if the touch itself might be worse than death. Boone froze, his fingers hovering inches from the fabric. "Ma'am," he said gently, "you're hurt bad. Let me help." The blanket quivered, and he heard her suck in a breath like she was swallowing pain. "You can't," she whispered. It'll get on you." That made him blink. He'd heard dying men say strange things before, but something about the way she said it made the hairs on the back of his neck rise. Still, he wasn't about to leave someone to freeze in the dirt. "I'm gonna look, all right," he murmured, and before she could protest again, Boone lifted the corner of the blanket, and felt the blood drain from his face. Beneath the frayed wool lay a young woman, no older than 20, her skin so pale it almost glowed against the grime and dried blood streaking her face. One eye was swollen shut, her lips split and bruised, but it wasn't the injuries that stopped Boone's breath, it was her arms, her hands, and the skin at her throat. Angry, jagged black veins pulsed beneath her skin like something alive was crawling just under the surface, twisting and branching toward her chest. The flesh around them was blotched purple and red, and in some places, the skin had split into weeping sores that looked raw and unnatural. Boone had seen snakebite, frostbite, burns, but this was something else entirely. She caught him staring and pulled the blanket tighter. "I told you," she whispered, tears pooling in her one good eye. "Don't touch me." Boone swallowed hard. "Who did this?" Her gaze flicked toward the west, where the horizon shimmered under the morning sun. "They called it the cure," she said bitterly. "Said it would make us stronger, immune to sickness. But it burned from the inside out. Most of them died in the pit. I crawled out." Boone's jaw tightened. He'd heard whispers in the saloons of Fort Ransom about a group holed up in the Black Mesa mine, experimenting on workers and vagrants they'd snatched from the road, but nobody had lived to tell the details. Until now. He looked over his shoulder at the open plain. If she'd escaped, they'd come looking. "You can walk?" he asked. She hesitated, then shook her head, trembling harder. Boone didn't waste another second. He scooped her up, ignoring her weak protests, and carried her to his mare. "You ain't dying here," he said, voice like stone. The ride back to his ranch was tense. He kept scanning the ridgelines, every shift in the wind making him check his back trail. She leaned into him unconsciously, burning hot with fever despite the cold air. By the time they reached his cabin, the sun was high and Boone's gut told him he'd already been seen. He laid her on his bed, stoked the fire, and fetched water. When he tried to clean her wounds, she jerked away. "It's inside me," she said. "If you touch it," Boone cut her off. "I've patched up men with worse." Let me worry about that. Still, he wrapped cloth around his hands before tending to her, not out of fear, but because he knew she'd accept the help easier. That night, the wind carried the sound of distant hoofbeats, faint but steady. Boone's mare snorted in the corral, restless. The girl, she'd told him her name was Marin, woke in a panic, clutching at the blanket. "They're here," she whispered. "The men from Black Mesa. They can't let me talk." Boone's mind shifted into the cold clarity of survival. He blew out the lamps, grabbed his Winchester, and positioned himself by the window. Sure enough, 3 riders emerged from the shadows, their faces half covered, rifles slung easy in their hands. The lead one called out, his voice oily and calm. "We're looking for something crawled away from us. Hand her over, and we'll be gone." Boone didn't answer. The man's smile widened in the moonlight. "You think you're saving her? You're just buying her more pain. And you'll wish you'd let her die." Boone stepped out onto the porch, rifle leveled. "I don't trade people for promises," he said flatly. What followed happened fast, too fast for thought. The lead man reached for his gun, and Boone's rifle thundered, dropping him in the dirt. The other 2 scattered, firing wildly, bullets chewing into the cabin wall. Boone moved like he'd been born for gunfights, reloading and firing in the same motion, until the night swallowed their retreat. He knew they'd be back with more men. Sure enough, 2 days later, the sound of many horses rolled in from the mesa. Boone had spent those days reinforcing the cabin, setting snares, and teaching Marin to shoot. Fever or not, she learned fast. There was steel in her that her trembling hands hadn't shown at first. When the gang came, 6 riders, circling like wolves, Boone and Marin fought shoulder to shoulder. The air was thick with gunpowder and shouted curses, the cabin shuddering with every impact, but they held. One by one, the riders fell or fled. When silence finally settled, the snow outside was red in the moonlight. Marin slumped against the wall, exhausted but alive, her eyes clear. "I thought I was already dead," she said softly. Boone holstered his rifle and looked at her for a long moment. "Reckon you just started living again." As the dawn crept over the plains, turning the blood-stained snow into a field of fire, Boone knew the Black Mesa men would think twice before riding this way again. And Marin, curse or no curse, wasn't going anywhere. If you believe some lives are worth risking your own for, if you believe the West was built on the grit of those who wouldn't turn away, then subscribe to this channel, because the next story might be the one that stays with you forever.